You're a freak. You could have recorded this episode in the night, but you didn't. So you must be that other thing. Are you that thing?
Remember me?
You fabulous host. You crawled out of a podcasting grave deeper than hell. Only one thing is going to do that for you. Not mindless consumption. Thought. No shame in thought. It's one of the greatest forces God gave us. The question is, do you have it in you to make it epic?
In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to episode 344 of Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I am James.
And I'm Maddy.
Oh, Mad Maddy, maybe?
Yeah, Mad Maddy. I figured that was better than Furiosa. I'm closer to Mad Max than Furiosa, with my name at least.
Yeah. But we are looking at Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, directed by George Miller and starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth. And this is, of course, the origin story of renegade warrior Furiosa before her encounter and team up with Mad Max in Fury Road.
Yeah, so in this one, young Furiosa is snatched from the green place of many mothers and falls into the hands of the great biker horde led by warlord Dr. Dementus. Sweeping through the wasteland, they come across the Citadel, presided over by the Immortan Joe. While the two tyrants war for dominance, Furiosa must survive many trials as she puts together the means to find her way home.
All right. Well, before we get into the spoilers, as always, we're going to give this some Popcorn Theology ratings. And the first up is the popcorn perspective. What do we think of the film, just from the sheer sort of non-thoughtful, just enjoyment level? Was it stale? Was it fresh? Was it buttered and salted? Or in other words, bad, good, or great? Give me your rating, Maddy, and a 1-minute reason why.
So I thought it was fresh. I think it was almost buttered and salted. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I think Anya Taylor-Joy and Hemsworth were great. I also really loved Tom Burke, although I wish he was fleshed out a little bit more in this one. Cinematography, as always, and George Miller is great. And I think the thing about George Miller's style, it really brings me into the movies. So I feel like I'm in the story rather than just watching. It's very visceral. So he didn't lose that from Fury Road. I felt like continued that. And I thought it was a really decent prequel to Fury Road that gave us some insight on an interesting character.
Cool. See, decent for me is probably a good word. And I think you seem to lean fresh to almost buttered and salted. Mm-hmm. I'm leaning on, if there's a middle of fresh, I felt like it was fresh. Yeah. I've been pretty sparing with my buttered and salteds these years, this 2024. But I think the performances were fantastic. I think they're strong written characters. Taylor-Joy and Hemsworth both did a great job. Alila Brown as young Furiosa did a good job. And Tom Burke as Praetorian Jack. I want to see more of him in other things coming out of this movie to just see what I looked up immediately what else he'd done. And there's some stuff, but I was like, I think he could do and be more. And But honestly, I felt like it needed editing. I felt like maybe it was about 15 minutes too long, or maybe I would have had 15 extracted and a few more put in. Maybe we'll talk about that when we get into spoiler territory. But
I agree.
But worst of all, I saw it in IMAX, got some really good seats, and man, it was so crystal clear that to me there was some cringeworthy CGI. Even in a year where some people have been knocking Godzilla, Kong, and other things too, considering the scope and the shoes that it had to fill a Fury Road, where it had so many practical effects, I just felt like it's just, especially in Act 1. And I mean, it's not spoilers to say, like there is a horse riding, and there is some vehicles. Some of the vehicles looked so fake, and that horse riding, I would have just rather had less in the movie, and not, that made it uneven for me. But the shoes it had to fill. Fury Road's in my top 10 action movies of all time, so this is a good movie. I'm not knocking it by. I had issues, but that just took it from great to good. And that's fine.
I think that's fair.
Right in the middle. But then we have the theological themes and the depth and stuff you could talk about afterwards. And sometimes you come out and, like your soda after a 2.5-hour movie, it is diluted. Or maybe that has some themes to talk about and it's a bit carbonated. Or maybe, like The Matrix, it's my cup runneth over with themes. So I'll actually go... I'll go first, Maddy. Okay, fine. I'm going to say cup runneth over. I'm going to say cup runneth over by a truck. I mean, it just gets it. There's so many themes. The big rigs capacity you see in this film. This movie's engine is hauling a serious amount of imagery and themes. And I think, sure, some are carryovers from the first film, but nevertheless, you can just take the opening image in this film and have a conversation. So for me, had everything.
No, I basically agree with you. Like, I said this movie is the green place of biblical themes. Nice. I mean, I think he basically took things straight out of the Bible, to be honest. I mean, it's rich with them, and we could talk about any number of things. And it looks like our lightning round is going to have quite a few things too. So just because we won't be able to get to all of it in depth, but there is a lot for sure.
Well, that's where some of our viewers come in, and some of the folks, our followers and fans. You guys can always fill us in on what we missed. But so it looks like we're basically, we are the same. Maybe variable on fresh, but certainly cup runneth over. So I'm excited to get to it and talk about it. But I also want to talk about, before we get there, our main home now is on YouTube. We are doing everything video and kind of we're focusing on that. So we want all of you guys who are watching this episode to drive on over as swiftly as you can, drive through the desert and landscape of the internet and find us on YouTube, like and subscribe, and just join us there so you can keep up with the content we have, as well as content that doesn't show up in the old podcast feed or other places too. So if you want to get the most, definitely go subscribe and like on YouTube.
Definitely. And also be sure to like and share this episode with your friends if you like what you hear. We really want to broaden the conversation, so we love comments. We love responding to them. That's kind of our goal, is to keep the conversation going after the podcast is over for you guys.
Yeah, and you can follow us just about everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, and of course they're on YouTube. So, and in fact, I'd say even if you don't like it, even if you hate it, come and tell us that you hate it. We'll have some conversation. That's good too.
We love hate comments. Another quick way you can help support us and the podcast is just to rate and review us on whatever podcast listener you're on iTunes. I listen on Spotify, any of them. I don't know if you can rate on YouTube. I honestly have no idea. But if you can do that, do that. You can also support us financially through Patreon and get some cool extra stuff, which James will tell you about.
Yeah, just donating a few extra dollars a month, a couple different tiers you can choose from, make you a patron saint of Popcorn Theology, gives you special access to an exclusive Facebook group, channel on the public Discord server, allows you to vote on future episodes, and now we're doing actually patron saint exclusive content as well, with different interviews and things outside of the normal movie reviews that we do. So lots of stuff for you to get involved with here at Popcorn Theology.
Yes. And also we have merch. You can find that through our website. I didn't bring any of my merch with me, unfortunately, but I have a hat, I have a t-shirt, I have a sticker, which if you sign up for the Patreon tiers, you do get a free gift. So sign up and you can get something from there. Right on.
Well, I think we are gassed up and ready to go. So let's go ahead. We'll take a short trip to, well, not Bullet Town or the Bullet Farm or Gas Town, but we will take a trip to Ad Town and be right back with more on Furiosa.
Popcorn Theology has been mindfully viewing cinema from a godly perspective since 2015. But why? Where did it come from? Well, one of the inspirations was our host James Harleman's book, Cinemagogue, published in 2012, exploring the intersections between film and faith. And now, fresh off the press, is an updated edition of the book, the Cinemagogue Director's Cut. This version contains over 40 pages of new content with reviews and recommendations, movie references, illustrations, further shaping the story-formed argument for God's existence while also delving deeper on hot topics like how we deal with sex and nudity in film. It's the how-to guide for all things popcorn theology. And this time, it's not just available on Kindle and in paperback, but also a hardcover edition for all you true book lovers. So if you like movies, if you're a cinephile, if you spend hours talking film, this book is definitely for you. Or if you're a casual consumer who thinks movie making exists merely for diversion, this book may just change your life. Cinemagogue available now at Amazon.com. For bulk orders or signed copies, check out Cinemagogue.com for details.
Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
As the world falls around us, how must we brave its cruelties?
You know, I do think Tom Holkenberg, is that, I think I'm pronouncing it right, the guy who does the music for this score and a bunch of others this year. Yeah, I'm starting to really like his body of work. He's one of those guys that sort of crept in. They're like, well, wait, who's this? And
yeah, I'll have to look that up because I'm not sure that I have.
Yeah, he's starting to impress me more and more. And so we are. But anyways, we're back, not just listening to the music of Furiosa, but about to drop the spoiler warning. Consider it dropped. We are now going to crash right through to all of the major plot points and dig deeper into Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Another thing I'm just going to say as we get into the popcorn thoughts, well, we'll just pop a little popcorn here.
Yeah.
And I will just admit, another thing about prequels I don't like is just they connect dots they didn't have to. I didn't need to see Max. I didn't need to almost see Max or whatever it was, his car and the bit. Like, I just know those things where you're kind of like, oh, I didn't need that. It was like in the Star Wars film that was wow, now I'm blanking on the name. What's the best one right before it blends right into A New Hope?
Yeah, why am I forgetting this too?
Oh, now I gave you brain freeze. But anyways, in that movie, they felt they had to have this forced little 10-second cameo of R2 and C-3PO. I was like,
in Rogue One, was it in
Rogue One? We
Yeah.
didn't need. It was like we didn't need that. It was like, yes, we know what world we're in. I didn't need that 15-second moment of Max.
I think it's really interesting that you say that because I've been watching a lot of reviews on Furiosa, and everyone's complaining that Max wasn't in it. So, everyone has said, oh, it was a great movie, but there was no Max in it, so it makes me mad, so it's not a good movie. I feel like the reviews on this have been so weird. Seriously, every single, YouTube video that I've watched, they've been like, this is why it's terrible, and this is why it's bombing, because there's no Max in it. But actually, it was a really good movie. And I'm like, so, okay. It just seems very confusing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I can understand strategically, we've only got one with the new Max character, maybe do two with Max, and then I don't know. I guess I from a strategy of franchise building, I could see how maybe you could complain there was a misstep, but at the same time, it's not like the film was trying to trick you. It clearly says who it's about.
But that's what people keep saying. It's like, oh, they're trying to replace Max with her. I'm like, no, I never felt that way, not even in Fury Road, which some people have said about that. And I don't think we're ever going to get another Mad Max movie with Tom Hardy, because from everything that I've read about George Miller is that nobody liked working with him. And I like Charlize Theron in interviews was like, I hated it. Like, I hated every minute of like being in Fury Road, which is really sad because they did a great job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So people are kind of like wishful thinking, like, I want this, but you're like, but it's never going to happen. And so, you know, he made this movie, and it was a good movie. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, what do we think of the other films? Which of the others have you seen? I have, and I didn't see them all when they came out or anything like that. I went, in fact, I saw them out of order too, like as many people have. So where are you at in the Mad Max film?
So people are going to think it's blasphemous because I hadn't seen any of the older ones. I watched Fury Road. That was my first Mad Max movie, was Fury Road. I kind of just had an idea of what Mad Max was, and I had seen like clips of Mel Gibson's movies. But for some reason, I wasn't that interested in watching them. But when Fury Road came out, a lot of people were talking about it, so I ended up renting it later. And I was like, wow, this is like, it's a weird movie, but like, I really like it. I'm like, this is a really good movie. And then this year, I watched the first Mad Max movie, the first one with Mel Gibson, which it was like a totally different vibe than Fury Road, which surprised me because seeing Fury Road first, I was expecting, I don't know, more crazy, and it was actually very much less crazy. It was actually a pretty normal movie. So I was like, oh, okay. But then I haven't seen any of the other ones, so I'm sure it gets, from what I've read, it kind of progresses into like what Fury Road becomes, kind of.
Yeah, the wasteland aspect doesn't really kick in until the Road Warrior, which is my favorite. And honestly, I'm a little bit, hardcore fans can be upset with me. Then I guess we'll just create some controversy. But I like 2. I like the Road Warrior, which is 2, and I like Fury Road 4. It's kind of like they talk about the Star Trek movies that the even numbered ones are the best. For me, it's 2 and 4. But I would honestly probably put Furiosa probably as 3. Because I honestly, I mean, a lot of people complain Thunderdome was kind of a weak, weird plot with Tina Turner stuffed into it and a whole bunch of other things. and that first Mad Max movie is odd, and it's a cool, almost indie type film.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that's a good word for it, indie, like an indie film.
But it didn't blow me out of the water like the Road Warrior did. That's sort of the one I've always loved, and so Fury Road kind of captured that heart, and Furiosa really does. I mean, it's capturing the same heart, and it's just as gonzo with almost all the same characters we met in Fury Road, and Morton Joe and everybody else. So only 2 have really, I think, 100% nailed it for me, and this would then be the next runner-up.
Yeah.
So
I think both Fury Road and Furiosa were just really good at building the world. I've really enjoyed being in this world. Yeah,
it's so I'll be honest, I'll go first and we'll get the bad out of the way. I'm sure I had some complaints. I talked about CGI stuff. It felt like even the opening city, the Paradise City where they're kind of at, like to me, it was just like that. It looked like a computer generated image to me. And for somebody who's, again, for George Miller's total dedication to sets, I would have liked that they had done more with that. And then there were some editing choices that were weird. I didn't feel we needed 2 scenes with her having to cut her hair.
Okay,
one was enough. And then also, like, why did she regrow it back out if she was pretending to be a boy? And then, so then we have to have it fully grown out in that scene when the fire comes through the grate, but doesn't even singe it. So there's just little things like that I was just like, odd editing, or maybe it was editing different. And then there's this really weird moment where Praetorian Jack, he drives the truck like a mile out of sight and then walks all the way back to talk to her.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand.
I didn't think it was that far away. I think it was just a hill. And he just kind of drove over the hill. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if he was just debating.
Or...
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that was kind of weird.
There were just some really weird choices where like the truck's not even in view. It's like, was that a pickup shot? I don't know. There was just little choices kind of took me out in a weird way. I don't know. But the good, right? Hemsworth, I mean, I just said, no offense to Anya Taylor-Joy, but of course, because of the writing, the amount of dialogue, Hemsworth almost steals the movie like Ken did in Barbie. Like just he
does.
He was amazing. They gave him all the best lines. It's like Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. It's like he doesn't outact Christian Bale, but he's given the role that has a lot more things to do. And so that in no way denigrates her role, which is actually, it's hard to have a presence with no dialogue, and she does it.
Yeah.
So I was actually a little surprised. I didn't think of her having the strength of presence that Charlize Theron does. And on the one hand, she didn't need to because she's growing into it, but I thought she grabbed that really, really well.
Yeah.
And I do think that seeing her have to get strong, as opposed to this whole thing you're talking about where people are complaining about replacing it with the woman. It's like, well, this isn't the typical strong female character, lame story that people have been complaining about over the last decade or so. Here we have a character where she has to grow, she has to get strong, she has to learn from others, men and women, right? Like any human story, there has to be growth, and they did that well. And so that when you get to that final, almost anticlimactic scene with her and Dementus, and by the way, I love it when a story does that sometimes. Both Blade Runner films have that to a degree. It's their conversation instead of confrontation is just amazing. So we'll talk more about that talk when we get deeper. But those are my popcorn thoughts. What about you, Maddy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same page. I just think the performances really carried this film. Yeah. And again, like George Miller films don't have a lot of dialogue usually, but he focuses more on the visuals, which I love. And I felt that in this movie as well. And it's like the acting is all done on the face, and it's within the landscape of this world. And I was very engaged. And I just love that Hemsworth is so different from his usual. And we were kind of talking earlier about the prosthetics.
You said the acting was on the face. I was like, okay, we're going to get to the nose here.
Yes, it's on the face. So we're going to, I'm glad that they gave him some prosthetics to ugly him up a bit, I guess.
Yeah.
But his character was so fun. He's just kind of this disgusting, charismatic guy who was fun to watch even when he was being bad. And like you said, I really enjoyed Anya Taylor-Joy's performance, and I thought she did really well in an action movie, and especially as a woman. But it's realistic. Like you said, it's not that she knows everything right off the bat and she's good at everything. She does have to learn. She gets her butt kicked repeatedly throughout this movie. And she's not the strongest person in the room. And she uses weapons to help her. You know, it's not just her manhandling everybody. And again, I like that she's using deception and, wiliness as her allies, and not just brute strength. Again, I don't think she is not a girl boss. So again, if people think that about this movie, that it's not what it is. She's not girl bossing anybody. So
yeah, and people talk about that. I mean, we have plenty of strong I think about a couple of some characters who, when you're in a landscape like this movie or The Walking Dead, or so, of course you have it. And what, even her mom, what was her? Was she Arnold Schwarzenegger? No, she was a sniper first and foremost. And it's like, oh, okay. And if you grow up even in that environment, I think we're growing up on the edge of the wasteland. So even having her as a kid be smart enough to, I mean, she was fighting back as a kid. She was biting through the gas lines. She was doing all like you would expect somebody raised in that, on the border of that rough environment, to actually have been taught. We're raised soft. Let's just face it. So
and I think but it seemed like they had taught their kids from a young age that this is a place to be protected, and so they did teach them certain skills, obviously, to keep them alive. But like you said, also I felt like some parts of the story were not engaging enough. I was never bored, but like you said, it was kind of weird. They had a really long intro with her as a kid, and I think somebody else had said it's like 40 minutes before you see Anya Taylor-Joy. That's a long time. And again, I think it's okay. I think that's okay. It wasn't horrible, but I wanted more of her relationship with Praetorian Jack.
Yes.
And I feel like they definitely cut that, because I felt like it just kind of went to the end of that, where they skipped maybe they didn't want a cheesy training monologue or whatever, but I felt like we needed something, because it just kind of cut right to the end. And I was like, I think there is more of a movie on the editing room floor. for this movie, that they cut some things that maybe they shouldn't have. They still built the relationship well, but it could have been better. So yeah, but yeah, I don't think it deserves like all the hate that it's getting, I feel like, or not getting. Again, like mixed reviews, people saying it. I would suggest go see it because it's a good movie. It's a good summer blockbuster.
Oh yeah, it's still one of the better films that I've seen this year. And so if you're like, I would never tell anybody to not bother. That's that in any sense. And I feel like, and even the financial issue, it's like people always mistake. Like if it's bombing, it's because, or if it's underperforming at the box office, that means people aren't seeing it. So they're not seeing it because they thought it was a bad movie. Like that doesn't make any sense. If they didn't see it, they have no opinion. And if they saw it, then they paid the money. So the reason it's underperforming, like honestly, people forget Fury Road was it was a critical success, not a financial success. Yeah. And it actually underperformed in a lot of ways. Like this is a niche genre of film, and one again that often doesn't get a lot of female viewers. It typically skews male. And so which is fine.
Like if that's your type of movie, then that's your type of movie. I don't expect all females to enjoy this kind of thing. I'm kind of an outlier. I feel like for sure. But yeah, I mean if your audience skews male, then, and maybe that's why males feel maybe a little left out on this one because it's focused on a woman, but I don't think you should feel that way because she isn't a girl boss. She's not acting like one. So I think even if you're a guy, you could give this movie a chance.
And that's where I wonder if the stigma of the stigma since Captain Marvel has come in and maybe unnecessarily sort of damaged this a little bit. Because my goodness, go back to the aughts, right? Men had no problem going to see the Underworld movies with Kate Beckinsale at the helm. Had no trouble seeing like 5 Resident Evil movies with Mia Jovovich at the helm. Yeah. And honestly, like Mia Jovovich, very, very slight actress, kind of like Anya Taylor-Joy. So it's like this hasn't been a problem until recent years. And so I think,
which I think is understandable. Like there are some really bad girl boss movies out there, but like again, like don't just assume that because you see that there's a woman in this film that it's automatically going to be bad, because I think they did it really good. I know, it's like, but I actually think it turned out quite well, and I will be the first to tell you if I think that it's a terrible girl boss movie, because there are a lot of them out there, and I don't like Captain Marvel or anything like that. So
but there's also another reason to see it, and that would be all of the chewy theology. So let's go ahead and pour ourselves a glass of theological soda, and I guess shift gears would probably be the right thing to say.
Yeah.
And shift into a higher gear and get this thing going on as far as theology and Furiosa. So we'll start with you, Maddy, since you obviously saw a ton. What's the biggest thing, or sort of the biggest concept that stood out to you?
So I think the biggest, most obvious, I just went with the most obvious one because I was being lazy, but it was just, it was, right there, like it's Eden, it's the fall, it's Paradise Lost, and also Dementus as the devil, is what I saw. So I think this whole movie revolves around a theme of Paradise Lost, or descent into a sinful world, because as we know, the movie begins in the green place, i.e. Paradise, and it's invaded by the biker horde, or at least a few of them. Yeah. And then Furiosa is taken away into the wasteland. She even grabs the fruit, like that first shot of her grabbing the fruit. I mean, it's so obvious to me. But she's taken away into the wasteland, i.e. the fallen world. And her innocence is lost there, and she can't seem to get back to the green place, almost as if it's been barred from her. And I love when we get to Dementus, he's the leader of the biker horde, he wears white. I know his cape changes color throughout the whole movie, so it starts out white, and he kind of appears as this angel of light. He's nice to her. He has a teddy bear. He kind of wants her to be his daughter, but kind of immediately he shows that he is no angel. And one of the quote, when he goes to the Citadel, he says, "Bring me your leaders and throw them down. You will rule with me in the new splendor of a new wasteland." And it just reminds me of Matthew 4, where the devil is tempting Jesus in the wilderness, and it says, again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to them, all these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. And I feel like Dementus is basically the same.
Both strategies wound up having about as good as I think.
Yeah.
Neither of them had good effect. Satan's didn't work, and Dementus's didn't work there either.
No.
That was a pretty cool scene when they start, just the Citadel jacks them up and sends them running.
Oh yeah, I was honestly not even expecting that, to be honest. But he just like showed him who's boss, and he kind of just runs away.
Yeah.
But with the looking at his cape and those color changes, it goes from white to red to black. And I just find that as a really cool and interesting visual progression of like the stain of sin and what he does to maintain power. And I was just, again, it kind of ties into the devil. You know, he was once a son of God, an angel of light, beautiful even. But he is deceitful. He's deceiving. And the way that Dementus and the devil remain in power is by enslaving people, but telling them that you're liberating them. And he wants to, I think it was interesting how he was obsessed with Furiosa and wanted to like adopt her as his daughter, but she wants nothing to do with him. I mean, because he killed her mother, but he wants her to be little D. He wants her to be little D.
The hubris there.
Yeah.
It's like, she'll come around. I mean, I only murdered her mom in front of her.
Yeah, exactly. But she doesn't. She never gives into that. She's never deceived by him. And again, like with Dementus, he kind of destroys everything he touches. He made Immortan Joe look kind of good in this movie, which I thought was interesting, because like Immortan Joe has this. You know, he's growing crops. He's still enslaving people in a horrible way, but like he's got a sense of order and even beauty sometimes. His brother painting that beautiful mural in Gastown, but when Dementus takes over, that mural is graffitied and the room is disgusting, and it just everything he touches he corrupts. And I don't know. I just think that. In the end, when Furiosa finds him and she demands everything back from him, right? So she says, I want it back. My mother, my childhood, I want them back. But she can't. And Dementus tells her that. And he even wants something back, which, again, I think ties into the devil. He wants something he can't have. He can't have the power there. So he just says, there's no hope. And there's some truth to that in a world without Jesus. Like, we can't have Eden again. We can't go back and change Adam and Eve's choice. We have to deal with the sin that we brought into the world. But we do have hope, and Jesus is the hope that we have for a new heaven and a new earth. So we can't go back to the old, but we get the new. Which brings me to the main thing, which was the seed. The imagery, again, the obvious imagery in this movie. So with this seed that she literally carries, it's this seed of hope, and she plants it in the place where she's actually eventually going to go back to. And I thought that was a really cool tie-in to Fury Road, that she planted it at the Citadel, because in the Fury Road, she discovers that the green place is no longer there. Again, you can't go back. It's gone. So she actually returns to the Citadel where she planted that seed. And I just think that's a beautiful way to kind of tie up that story and kind of lead into Fury Road. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on some of those?
And whether or not she planted it in Dementus,
yes.
I'm still trying to figure out, was that, am I supposed to take that as mythical, or am I supposed to take that as...
So they said it was literal because they're like, well, this is the truth because Furiosa told me herself. But like, it's so out there
do
that
I believe him?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it could, realistically, it couldn't happen. Like, he would be dead, like, long before that. And it was just kind of weird, but it was a good picture, I think. Like kind of defeating sin, and you get fresh out of the rotting. You know, you get this new life. So in a sense, like it makes sense pictorially, but realistically, no.
I think Kat and I were thinking that it was when we watched it, we were like, I think maybe just his skeleton there would have been
that would have been a little more realistic,
just as effective. But then they're kind of toying with that. Well, did she get vengeance? Did she? I guess there's a scene that they cut out where she actually cuts out his tongue.
Oh.
And Anya Taylor, which explains why he's not speaking, that he's not even verbal at the end.
Yeah.
And she really wanted them to keep that in. And apparently, for whatever reason, I guess enough carnage. I feel like enough carnage has been done. You've shown an arm ripped off. You've shown, I think we could have had the tongue thing. But anyway.
Yeah, it's like, at this point, it wouldn't have made much of a difference.
Yeah. Those are the little things where it's like, okay, I would edit this movie different, and I would leave that in, and I would have more, like you said, more Praetorian Jack scenes, and that season of her life, and then have some other pieces in there too. But I like the idea of, which is for Christians, right? We're supposed to be planting seeds here, like the kingdom is both now and to come. So like she's planting seeds there, and growing things, and growing not just what will be an escape attempt, but actually will end up coming back and overthrowing.
Yeah.
Liberating. Spoilers for Fury Road. It's actually quite depressing when she gets back to where she thought she'd find the new kingdom or the old kingdom. So again, to that idea, you can't go back to Eden. But then she kind of gets to go back with the help of Max in the next movie and kind of redeem the Citadel. So that was a pretty wonderful imagery there. I was wondering, do you think Dementus wanted to destroy everything?
No, I think he was just incompetent, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he is still malicious though. I mean, he crucified her mother. I mean, in order to he wanted to find the green place, and he wanted to take it over. So he will do whatever is necessary to do it, but maybe it's just his mannerism that makes him seem kind of like a fool, like the way he talks. Because he did a great job with that, like just being he sounds kind of dumb and silly. But part of me thinks maybe a little bit, but at the same time, still very violent and will do anything to get what he wants.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it almost parallels with the devil. I mean, you think about the devil rebelling. The pride there obviously thinks you're competent or more competent than God.
Yeah.
That's like, no, man, you're like.
I mean, it's a laughable concept to think that the devil can overthrow God. Like, it's silly. Yeah. It really is. And it kind of ties back to the comedy episode that Eric and Miles did, like God is a comedian. He is a comedian. Like that's really, I mean, really, devil, you think that you're gonna, take over an all-powerful God who made you? It's silly.
Yeah, Dementus can't even rise up to even be as good as any of the trio that manages this little triune kingdom that we've got going on here in Mad Max world. And so that, I kind of came at it from, I think, a slightly different angle, but I love that you actually started thinking about Dementus in terms of the devil. I think where I went with a similar idea was just looking at the idea of the wasteland and this idea of facing trial in the desert and thinking of them as two types of people. It's almost a character study of both Furiosa and Dementus. So because there's actually a lesser theme of forbidden fruit that comes into play, and forbidden fruit for Christians obviously has a direct correlation right to the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
But a lot of people will talk about, well, that's forbidden fruit. You shouldn't take that. And for Furiosa, that is kind of what, I mean, her little friend at the beginning says, you've strayed too far. You're further than you ought to be. Mm-hmm. So she's gone further than she ought to go. And I think in the same way, that's like Dementus. He wasn't without skill or capability, but part of his downfall is he also is equally, like, he's at chasing fruit that is beyond his reach. I think there's a saying, right? Sometimes your reach exceeds your grasp, and that's and so he himself is chasing this forbidden fruit of leadership, and he thinks so highly of himself, and I suspect, I mean, Furiosa technically was a little arrogant. straying out there too close to the bikers, straying away too far from home. That's a lot of fairy tales.
Yeah.
That's like, youthful arrogance, and you stray too far, and the wicked witch or the person with the house, somebody takes you in, and bad things happen. And Dementus, he's the same way. He's bitten off more than he can chew. Actually, Romans 12 says, "Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but think of yourself with sober judgment." And so we see, obviously, his character, he doesn't even understand the relationship sometimes. Like, he's got the octobus there, and he starts arguing with the one guy's like, "Well, no, I don't answer to you. I answer." So he makes a peer partnership, but then gets upset about it when then his authority is challenged.
Yeah.
And so you just here, I think the movie gives us a character study of how antagonist and protagonist both are facing this time and trial in the wasteland. Both have had horrible tragedy. Both have lost family. Furiosa by Dementus's hand. But Dementus, we don't know exactly, but he's lost wife and kids.
Yep.
Like, that's a horrible thing. Like, you think about what could make any man crack. Well, that would be a pretty big test. The loss of your whole family and maybe one fell swoop or whatever happened. Like, well, whether it was actually when things became a wasteland and they died in that, or whether they died since, we don't know. I don't think we need a Dementus, a Mad Max Saga prequel. But the movie has these two characters in the desert, and it got me thinking about the Israelites wandering 40 years in the desert before they could enter the promised land. Or Jesus, as you said, being out in the desert for 40 days tempted by Satan. And so we see how both of them deal with the test. Yeah. And one grows and the other totally withers. And that was just pretty interesting. It's like, this is what the desert does. It either refines us or it tempers us. Christian, we'd say sanctifies us, or it burns us, right? It melts us. We're not purified. We're just totally destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what I liked seeing Furiosa do was it's that idea of being tempered and learning, because it including her setbacks, like Daniel in Babylon. Like, I think the work in the rig, like when she has to jump out and swing out and save that big huge crane from falling, they're trying to lift up that construction vehicle. I was like, she having to do the work in the kingdom, actually, like that builds her muscles, it builds her mind. She gets to learn how to build, and she understands the ins and outs of the rig and the engine and everything about it. She has to then, and even then when she stows away, she thinks she's ready. And Praetorian Jack says she's clearly not, and she's humble enough to receive that. Yeah, exactly. And like, oh, okay, she still has to grow as a character. And whereas Dementus, we see I did love his motorcycle chariot. That was just a beautiful. Cool. But that's just a symbol of pride and Roman emperor, and I'm the king of the world, and he certainly he has some skills because he's got himself so far. But then his humbling at the Citadel should have taught him something, and it doesn't. He has that Michael Scott confidence in self. He's like Michael Scott of the Wasteland. Yeah, and then he's a bad manager. Like, he cannot control it when they come into town and just everything's chaotic, and he has to escort them because his own people are causing problems and they can't even fill up the rig. It's like, well, he can't hold up his end of the deal that he promised. So then we have issues. Okay, like the wasteland's just burning him away. His word's no good. His promises are no good. All the ways he tries to tell people they'll be equal isn't true. And meanwhile, you look at Furiosa. She loses her mother. She loses an arm. She loses a mentor. I like that they just left it ambiguous. Maybe there was a love relationship there. Yeah. You could sort of take it as you want it. But when push comes to shove, right, she still chooses hope over hate. And just instead of just having simple vengeance, instead of just then trying to run back to paradise, she learns enough to want to then go back and be a blessing to and free others. Yeah. Because she's seen the other ladies there. Like, she's still braving the desert with a hope toward restoration, which she gets in Fury Road, not as she expects. But I just thought it really did, like, Dementus almost is the deeper character study, because we haven't met him Like, we know kind of where Furiosa is going.
Yeah.
So I guess we kind of know where that transformation goes. But his wife and family were killed, and he's given up any sense of prior virtue. I kind of wonder, like, he's there, he had a teddy bear for his kid. Like, it's like this is somebody who formerly probably had virtues and claimed to be a decent individual.
Yeah.
And as I was reading a couple reviews, one that was actually positive, thankfully. It was said, it's interesting this backstory makes Dementus a foil for both Furiosa and Max. All of them lost their families. But Furiosa and Max decide to use the madness their losses caused to become heroes, while Dementus uses his loss as an excuse to become a villain.
Yeah.
I think it's something I don't like in movies. I liked it in movies in the 90s, where instead of just having the villain be a mustache twister, we then sort of have some understanding and at least some empathy or some sympathy for why a villain's fallen. It's the Anakin Skywalker trope.
Yeah.
But I also think some movies are going almost so far as to like challenge whether then they're really villains.
They want to justify the villain. They don't want to. Yeah.
And so I like that this movie still has him be twisted enough that we would never seek to justify his evil.
Yes.
And that's another point I thought was great about this movie. He sees himself as like, I'm a father figure, I'm a unifier, I'm an equalizer, I'm a bringer of justice. So he declares himself bringer of justice and retribution. But it's obvious, like when he meets Furiosa, it's like, we're not taking you to paradise because you are not fit for paradise.
Yeah.
You'd be a snake in paradise. And he's self-deceived. I think what's interesting is then 15 years pass, and that's that final confrontation. And it seems like he doesn't even believe he's given up even any belief that there was a paradise at all.
Yeah.
He's like somebody who's abandoned himself to a materialistic world and nihilism. And he sees like the only thing we can hope for is I want to be memorable. Like I want my name to be remembered. I want to stand out. I hadn't noticed the hood, the color changing, but even like if we go into the third act, he's like, you've made me the dark Dementus now. And so he's fully given over anything that he even still had in contrast with Furiosa when she was young. Like, I'm not even sure he would take a girl on like he would Little D 15 years prior. I think we actually see his character darken in that way, and he just wants his death to be epic at the end of the day. Like it's the time of the desert's just eaten everything human about him alive, and that goes back to the Israelites, right? Some of them grumbled and complained in the desert, and literally God opened up the ground and swallowed them alive, and they never got to see the promised land. But Furiosa, on the other hand, perseveres, and she gets to play a Christ-like kind of role between both of these movies, in the way that she helps and frees and gives people freedom. So she's not an exact Christ by any stretch, but she doesn't waver and resist temptations or adopt the ways of the wasteland. I was thinking about James 1:12. It says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he'll receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." Now, of course, we're talking about the test of trial more in regards to standing firm for your faith in Christ. But it's just that idea. It's like, here we have, like, she is steadfast through all of it. Losing an arm. Yeah. I mean, even seeing then Praetorian Jack get brutally murdered. Like she persists, and I think some of that may have come from even her mom's sacrifice. So it's probably another subpoint. But all the verses that Scripture talks about persevering to the end in terms of the Christian life, like Jesus says, in this world we'll have trouble. You and I, obviously, like probably all of our followers of this podcast, Popcorn Theology, we're not facing the kind of trial that they're facing. Yeah. I'm not in any danger of being crucified, probably, at least literally. Yeah. And yet there are some, I have enough connections and read enough world news, like some of that still happens. And it's that idea of the person will persevere even in the face of true death and persecution. And it, like, thankfully in Christ, this is as close to hell as we'll ever know if we're in Christ and we persevere. And so I think this is a great story about perseverance, and a great story then, as you're talking about, both the fall and then a kind of unique George Miller style restoration. So
And I love that you use that word persevere, because and the only reason that she can persevere is because she has hope. And Dementus doesn't, because that's one of his literal lines. Is he says there is no hope. So the only thing we can do is to just, take power where we can get it, and again, make it epic. But the only reason that she can persevere when he can't is because she has the seed of hope. She has the promise of a paradise that she once knew. He doesn't believe in it anymore, but she does. And that's kind of like us as Christians in the world. Like, I firmly believe if I wasn't a Christian, I would be a very depressed person, because I need a meaning for life. Like, I need to have a hope that there's something more than this. What is it? C.S. Lewis said that our heart yearns for another world because we were made for another world. We know what we've lost. So we yearn for paradise. So me knowing that there is a paradise to come helps me get through this world of trials, because it is very hopeless if you don't have something to look forward to, if you don't have Jesus to guide you.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the conversation, even the last decade, and without getting deep into politics and things, but one word I often hear is power. It's who has the power. The conversation is always about who has the power, who should have the power, just even distributing the power. I'm not always saying that those are bad conversations to have, but it's always about power and holding the power. And I say, well, those are conversations kind of devoid of hope.
Yeah.
Like,
it's all about here on earth, not looking forward to something better. Yeah, again, it all has to do with they want to make this world a paradise, but you can't. There's too much sin in this world to make it a paradise. But again, if you don't have God, then that's what you're gonna do naturally, is try to make it a paradise.
We have a lesser hope, like your contrast with the seed and the tree and the citadel. That's like, okay, so we there are fruits we can enjoy here in this life that come from that hope that we have. They can actually be grown out of that.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be, we see that in community of the church. We see that in places where like there can be fruit of relationship, but we always have to remember that they're pointing us to a future hope where we're not going to ever perfect the place that we have here. That would be like honestly, that would be like if we thought that the Citadel was the best you could ever get.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
No.
Which is where even if Fury Road even then kind of sells us short at the end, or maybe it just means the story's not done. Obviously, right? They were able to redeem the Citadel, but certainly
they
the
redeemed
Citadel,
the planet, though.
a Citadel is not paradise.
Yeah, no.
Even on its best day. So, but yeah, lots of good stuff there. But it's probably time for a little lightning round, because as you said, there are lots of other subpoints, or even just moments in this film here and there where there are things that maybe we mindfully have to consider, reject, receive, redeem, or maybe just drop as little nuggets for other people to flesh out fuller in conversation. But was there anything? I have a couple. Was there anything you wanted to start with as far as?
I'll let you go first. I'll see if I come up with anything.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting interchange that I think. Since we don't really get to see the fruit of the conversation, it was just an interesting line that I think could stick in people's head. And it's when the teacher, the historian, is talking to little Furiosa, and he just says, just make yourself useful to him somehow, like do something positive, and then he'll see you as useful, and then you'll have a place to stay. It's this idea of really our worth is fully defined by our utility.
Yeah.
And which would be a very materialistic, sometimes I fear that there are certain political ideologies, or I would say godless ideologies. You look at something like the Khmer Rouge, or like we've actually seen this even in politics and world powers, where like humans must have a utility or they're worthless. Well, that would discard everyone with a strong disability. And it's that idea of utility being what gives you worth or purpose, versus a Christian view, which would say, no, right out of the gate, we have human dignity being made as in the image and likeness of God. And utility is something we do figure out learning to live together and seeing how we can help one another. But that's not the definition or foundation of one's worth or identity.
Yeah.
And so many people even in the Mad Max movies, you look at it's like the historian, or like even their names are kind of defined by their roles in some cases. And it's like that's not who we are. That's not who we ought to consider. That's not how we need to define ourselves, especially not if it's just to have the favor of the powers or leaders on Earth. And it's like that. I think the movie's not raising it up, but I didn't feel it's like, well, we have to make sure we understand what that means and reject it.
Yeah. Well, I think Furiosa in a way rejects it, because especially if you're looking at both this one into Fury Road, because in Fury Road she's helping the wives escape because they're slaves, and she doesn't really have a reason to help them. Like, again, like, it's only because she has a hope that she can help others. And so she helps them escape simply because they're women and they deserve help, like they need help. They shouldn't be enslaved like this. That's wrong. But Immortan Joe would only view them as why, like just to, produce offspring for him. Yeah. Which never seems to work out.
Thankfully.
But that would be pretty bad. But yeah, so I think Furiosa in a way rejects that idea. So it is interesting that historian tells her that, but then she ends up freeing people. So
yeah. And I also thought it was interesting too. This to be tying to something I think we can redeem would be that who is our Christ-like character who sets these people free is Furiosa, and what's her mother's name? Mary? Okay.
Was it Mary? I didn't even look that up.
Mary Jabasa, but that was like, okay.
MJ.
So the heroic saving characters. Oh yeah, that's weird too. We've got another MJ. I don't know. Peter, who was the father? Peter Parker. But that was before the incident. He must have died in the nuclear war.
Yeah, in the nuclear.
But of course, in her, then we not only do we have that curious name imagery, but we also have someone who is a martyr for the cause, and I think that's a very that's something we ought to receive and consider. I think every time we come across those story plots, both the regard for the saints who have made that sacrifice in the relationship to our context and understanding faith, not recanting faith, laying down their lives for the gospel, and the fact, there's a sober fact, we never think it would come to us, but like that is an image we should receive and we should prepare our hearts for. Whether that's simply the way we sometimes have to do it relationally, maybe it's the death of a relationship, the death of our career, who knows? Like we could be called, and we should always think on those images when we see them and think, okay, like that someone who's so devoted to, I'm not going to give up my cause, my people, what she believes in for that. It's like, well, that is distinct imagery the Christian can fully receive.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think I was looking at it. Daniel Ellis in our Patreon group had pointed out some cross imagery in the movie with her being crucified, but also when Furiosa's getting fired at from behind and she's on a beam that's a cross, and so he pointed that out. He's like, they show this in the trailer quite often too. So that Christ-like imagery sprinkled throughout. So, and again, like I just think with the fruit as well, like I'm pretty sure George Miller just picked a lot of themes from Genesis and the Gospels and just kind of threw them in there.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes even the truths come out of the mouths of the villains too, and I think sometimes it's easy to not pay attention to the rant. But when Dementus was ranting too, I mean, and at first I thought he was making it solely to so to spare his life, which I'm not really sure what he wanted at that. I think he was demented.
I think he was,
Because then he winds up having a seizure or a stroke there. In the midst
that was
of
weird. That was one of those weird things that happened in this movie that I wasn't quite sure what was going on.
Yeah. It just sort of had. I mean, he'd been hit in the head how many times at that point?
Yeah,
and wrecked and. Yeah. But he makes the point that hate and revenge are not going to make her whole. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh. And so you actually have, as much as it was weird with what they did with the seed and his body, et cetera, but to try to get the stab, even if you go all the way back to the first Mad Max movie, like the best Max gets is revenge. Mm-hmm. They're actually kind of similar.
Yeah.
Like at the end, he ties the guy. She sort of like got the guy cuffed to the car.
Yeah.
Back in that first old movie, and he leaves the person there to basically burn and explode and or cut his own arm off, and so losing an arm. So there's some interesting little tiebacks to Mad Max in that first movie, but all Max really gets is revenge, and I don't think he gets satisfaction. And lots of movies laud revenge, and as much as some of them have a level of satisfaction, we have to be careful as Christians too. We don't fall into that idea that, because even though we might not kill somebody, there are plenty of ways to get revenge. Plenty of lesser ways to get revenge, and we have to be able to. And that's why I think the movie clearly speaks against it, and so I'd say we can receive that, or we need to make sure we understand that it's saying it's not going to satisfy, and so we shouldn't go there.
That was cool that he kind of told a truth there, even in the midst of his ranting. But it's like that's true, and he kind of was referencing, again, like, I can't bring your mother back, or anything, like killing me is not going to bring anybody back. And it's true. You have to have something else to hold on to.
Yeah. Well, it's probably more, but we've probably done a pretty good job as far as filling some time here. We might have to leave things to others for the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, talk about it in the Facebook group, guys. Tell us your ideas.
That's right. Whether it's a Discord or if you're a new follower and haven't joined us on Patreon, go to our Facebook page, Popcorn Theology, and drop some thoughts there. We'll certainly be posting the whole episode and clips, and so lots of room to talk about all the things that we missed. I've only seen it once. Some probably passionate fans are probably out there who've already seen it 2-3 times.
Yeah.
And have more of the quotes down, have more of the issues and elements to talk about. So. Thank you, Maddy, for going above and beyond with not just hosting, but taking the time to join in on some makeup. Did we need did you need to give a tutorial, or is it just smeared on your face?
I mean, basically, it's just grease paint and black eyeshadow. That's all the tutorial I got.
There you go. Right on. And hopefully that's it. And you don't have to get in some kind of dangerous vehicle and drive across the desert on your way home. So
no, I don't want to do that. I can't even drive a stick shift, so.
Neither could Anya Taylor-Joy but she never did not even know how to learned how to drive for the first time making this movie.
Wow. Well, that's cool. That's kind of cool, actually. I kind of like that. She made it believable. She looked like she knew what she was doing. Yeah.
I saw her talking about one of her first times driving. She had to basically make the car do a 180. So it was
wow. What a way to learn to drive for a Mad Max movie. That's pretty epic.
A trial by fire, just like the movie. So there you go. Well, hopefully for some of you, if this is your first time listening to Popcorn Theology, hopefully maybe this is your trial by fire, that talking about this stuff is worth engaging. But until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.